I made a few verses some years ago, but it's very long, but I'll sing a verse or two of it anyway if I remember it. I'll tell you of a lovely place that I will ne'er forget. It lies in North Fermanagh, it's the fairest I have met. By the sill is steep with its banks so sweet, where the scented breezes blow. And some drenched fields are which pasture yields, you'll find a place called Bow. Around the lovely mountains gone, bedecked with darkest hue, where abundant stalks of fleecy flocks are charm to the view. Below lie fertile valleys where the streamlets calmly flow, with glades and groves and shelter coves in that lovely place called Bow.
Bow's a very rural, peaceful, tranquil place. You know, I don't think you go anywhere in the world that you could equal what Bow has to offer. Very hard to put that in writing what it actually is, but the peace, the tranquility, the air, you know, it's just all there, and it's very hard to put your finger on it, you know. People are lovely here, both religions, never a problem. We have no issues whatsoever. We all help each other out and have done in the olden days, you know. It was always very, very good place to live, you know. My father was a character, like, you know, he was a real character. He was a man of song. He made songs, a lot of songs. He wasn't a talented singer, but he could sing. He was also very good at poetry and made a lot of poems about his late father and his late mother, and also about our wee baby brother that died at 6 years of age. And then, close to his final years, he made that poem on my wee brother Pat. And I think when he was coming to the end of that poem, the first time I ever heard it, without a doubt it was the first time I ever seen a tear in his eye. He made the living out of the land and spuds and all the vegetables grown and put in by hand, by spade. I don't think my father would have ever got any revenue at all from creels, but he had the enjoyment of making them. I mean, he would be singing songs when he'd be making the creels, and that's how you'd locate him. He'd be just singing or thinking of another song or a poem, or that he had halfway through. He was manufacturing a creel, but he was also manufacturing a poem at the same time, you know. I wish, like everything else, he was around today, because the questions that he wouldn't answer when he was here, he might answer them today. But my father, you know, had a fantastic way of not answering a question that you asked him if he didn't want to answer, and he just broke into song. When you asked my father something, he broke into song, and then if you asked him again a bit louder, he got louder. So he never said he didn't want to answer the question, but he just answered you in song, you know. That was his way of talking.
Well, now I think to finish up again now, when I've showed this creel making, I have a couple of verses that I retained from an old song that a local man made years and years ago, maybe up to 100 years ago. And I got a few verses of it that I remember. It been in deep meditation as I rambled o'er the lea. My thoughts.
And my father was this was a sort of a hobby. In the later years it was a hobby, whereas in the early years it was very, very essential, because on the wee small farms all around here we had no tractors in those days. It was all done on donkey and carts, and he brought the donkey and creels, and then in the later years there was the donkey's cart, of course, come along. But in the early years it was, the donkeys were very good for going up hills, and very badly. We had no roadways back in the early days, you know. I'm talking about back in my father's young years. But these creels have survived now all these years, and it's nice to have them, and we're back at the original scene here, one of the original scenes, and where it was filmed. So it's fantastic to have this. This, as I said before, this is the one that he was just doing before he got ill and passed away. So we kept it in the barn there. It has survived all these years, and we'll try and keep it for another few years as a bit of a keepsake, so to speak. You know, nice to have it. The creel style varied. You know, you could have a sort of, my father made a sort of a rectangular but yet round corners, where in some counties in Ireland you got literally a square creel. And I suppose back to the making of the creel, my father had a template, which was the wooden template which we have today, where you stuck in the rods in the hole and that made your template. Whereas before that, the older people, a lot of people used to put them on the ground, just in the shape of the creel, into the soil, and then they made the creel around that. But with the weather, that was always a bit of a hassle, you know. So if you made the template, you had your Sally rods or hazels. Two rods you could use was the Sally or the hazel. Sally was a little bit better for bending, whilst the hazel lasted a bit longer but was harder to bend and manoeuvre, you know. Then in dry seasons, when he had the willow or the hazel, you know, picked in bundles, leaving it ready for when he had time to do it, because bear in mind we were living on a farm and all the farm work had to go on. So then we had to get step them in water. So there was usually a drain that we had to make a sort of a dam with and capture the water and bury these clumps of hazel and Sally there, so that they could stay nice and moist for manufacturing the creel, so to speak, you know. It's complete dedication. You've got to have someone, either you have a use for the creel and you have to have it, but as at that era we were just growing out of that era, and the creel was no longer going to be an important part of life. Whereas if you had turned the clock back 10, 20 years to my father's time, it was vital. And you had to bring the turf from the bog, you know, you had to bring your things out, your manure, your spuds, everything had to be carried. Where you had the donkey, and then you had the poddogs, which was the apparatus that went over the donkey's back, and then you had two spikes out of the poddog, and you hung the creel on either side. It was important to have two the same weight, because the donkey didn't like, obviously, the imbalance. My father he suffered badly from rheumatoid arthritis, which was the joints, and such as all his family were the same, they affected him. But he, you know, you'd see him trying to grab the rods at the very beginning, and all of a sudden then he'd be tampering the rods, and all of a sudden his hands were free, and all the arthritis seemed to have just vanished for that whilst he was working at them, and he'd be twirling. You'd say, this is completely different than from he started, you know. It was just the fact that the work, and it just seemed to be, you know, magic.
That goes round in two ways, and it holds the creel in position.
And down here with the fishing rod that I'm holding in my hand at this minute, which I retrieved this morning. It's about 40, 50 years of age, but it's still there, you know. This is what he was catching the fish on.
Well, I'm sitting here now at the back of us, at the Stony Open. And I had a great day's fishing. I got a lovely wee peck and a Neil. And I let away, of course, a few more, as usual.
Well, I got the camera, I suppose, I got it to record things that would be forgot about, such as the kids when they were born, my father making the creels, which I knew was a day in art, and my father here at the loch where he fished and learned to swim.
It's lovely here now along the whole beach when the flood's low. The lake's very low at the present time. There's a nice strand all along the whole thing, and it's a nice view all directions. All directions. Especially when the weather's good. You could just sit away here at leisure. It's really real health. It's as good as Bundoran.
Obviously the stone in the background, or the stones, there's another stone covered. The water's high at the moment, but this is where he learned to swim. And he swam obviously from there to White Hill, and that was a fairly big swim in those days. And like myself, he was very fond of the water. I swim every day, so it's a good exercise and a good therapy. Kept us sane, so to speak, you know.
These two stones there, before the Sillis was drained, they were covered, and I often got them and dived off them out into the lake. But now they're bare when the flood's low, since the Sillis was drained. And there's now where I swam hundreds of times, back and forth there, without a hit, from that, which is a quarter of a mile till White Hill from Ross. And I often swam it on my own.
My camera was bought off a chemist in Enniskillen called Follis's, Herbie Follis, who was a non-qualified doctor. Everybody that got sick went to Herbie. They didn't go to the doctor. Herbie's in good health yet. I was chatting to him the other day and I was telling him that we were going to do a wee bit of talking about his camera, the Cine camera, and he was a very good help, good backup. He knew a lot about the camera. If anything that you weren't sure about, you could brought back to Herbie, you know.
The most important thing when you get how to know the way to make it is the support that you give the rods with your hand.
I reckon, you know, I was in my 30s, early 30s when I started to make it, late 20s, early 30s. And my father obviously was in his early 70s at that stage, and we decided to, I had wanted a white background for making my piece of the film, so I whitewashed the byre wall where we kept the cows tied. So we got out the brush and just had a white background, and my brother-in-law Michael McGear, who done also some filming with his Super 8, he done it against the corrugated iron shed, and that's the scene where we had the turkeys naturally come up to see what is going on, and the dog and all the rest, you know. I suppose like all fairly young people, I hadn't the incline to start learning to make a creel at that stage, so I says, if I make it in detail on camera, I can learn it at any stage. And that was my idea of doing it. And as well as that, keeping in the back of my mind that, you know, come 10 years' time, I wasn't probably not going to be able to do it. Either my father wouldn't have been around, or I wouldn't have been around, or whatever. So it was to record, basically, at the time, which it was a pretty expensive way of filming. You know, you took your 3-minute slots and sent them away, and it cost a considerable amount of money. But the good side of that was the colour and the quality was fantastic. My father was, he enjoyed that sort of thing. You know, he loved just, you know, keeping out in the public, and he wasn't shy. He wasn't shy, you know. I'm not that shy either, but I'm just not as forward as him. You know, he would break into song for anybody and say a poem for anybody, and you know, he was that sort of character. You know, and the fact that it was recorded, he was conscious of the fact that it was going to be there forever. Now, he never ever thought it'd be on the World Wide Web. I knew that it was going to be there, and you always had it in your mind, you know, with technology moving on, could you ever transfer it to the modern equipment, such as right up to digitised today? You know, it was moving to videos, to cassettes, you know, But we've got right there, and I'm delighted to say now it's on the World Wide Web there for forever, hopefully, you know. Oh, I think it's vitally important that we preserve films, because it's going to be lost otherwise, you know. It's going to be lost. The importance of this here, and things like this, you know, there's lots of things like this are just going to be lost, you know. And people will say, I remember my great-grandfather or my grandfather talking about that, but that's as far as it goes. Whereas if you have it preserved on film, all of a sudden you get people saying, this is real. This is not just my grandfather talking about it 100 years ago. This is real. You know, this is the flesh. I can see this, you know, and I can do this again. So I think it's very, very important. I couldn't overemphasize how important it is to have it on film. Switch on the... Yeah, there's no sound at the beginning of this, but we have sound or a bit towards the end.
And slowly here now along the whole big when the flood flew, the next